Hello everyone and thanks for tuning in. Today I want to talk to you about how to build a gallery wall. Now, gallery walls are a really cool way to add a lot of uniqueness and personality to your space. However, creating them can sometimes be a huge undertaking. It can be quite difficult for some people to curate pieces that complement each other visually in terms of theme, color, medium, and framing to create an overall cohesive visual impact. I myself struggled for months overthinking and overplanning mine before I came up with an easy approach that worked for me. Now, there are many different types of gallery walls, and there's no right or wrong way of building a gallery wall. Some people recommend that you frame all of your images first and lay them out on the floor and arrange them in an aesthetically pleasing way that suits you before tracing them out on butcher paper, which you will then cut out to use as stencils to map out your gallery on your wall. I tried this method, but I found it too time-consuming, wasteful, and unnecessary in my opinion. In this video, I'm going to break down my approach and walk you through my process of building a gallery wall. I will also be giving you a couple of tips to help keep costs low, particularly for those of you that might be on a budget. So, that said, let's get into it. So the first thing I did was pick a theme and select my images accordingly. I love photography, particularly fashion and portrait photography, so I comprised images that fit this criteria for the most part. Now, my style is very vintage, glamorous, sexy, very dark and moody, and very rock and roll. So I chose images that convey this vibe in some way, shape, or form. I'm a former fashion designer, so I already had a lot of these fashion editorial images on hand from previous projects and work. I also love art, and I've commissioned several pieces over the years which I wanted to incorporate into my gallery wall. So I chose the ones that fit my fashion and portraiture theme. So the next thing I considered was my color palette. Arranging images by color and composition can be difficult, so I decided to keep things simple for myself by selecting or making all of my images black and white. Doing this already helped tie everything in. As far as the artwork goes, I selected pieces that consisted mostly of muted black, white, and gray tones so that they would blend in with the photography. So the third thing I considered were the frames. Now, I already had some of my photos in frames, and I had some frames laying around, but I needed a lot more of them as I was creating a floor-to-ceiling gallery wall. I was lucky enough to find frames that were 50% off from a local store, so I took advantage of that sale and bought a variety of frames of different sizes. At this point, I didn't think too much of what images would go into which frames. I just bought what I needed to fill my wall. I will explain why later. I intentionally chose frames made of the same color and material to keep things uniform and cohesive to make arranging them easier later. In my case, I chose simple black frames complementary to my black and white color scheme.
Let's see if we got the facts straight. Did it ever occur to you that they might have used the drug to carry the body out?
Instead of buying extra frames, I just bought what I needed, then I took the ones I already had and spray painted them black, keeping in mind that I was creating cohesion with color. This also helped keep costs low. It's always best to reduce and reuse whenever possible. It's good for the environment and it's good for your pocket. You can also buy cheap frames at thrift stores and paint those as well. So the first thing I did was, I took the images that I already had in frames and placed those on the walls first. Then I built around them. I arranged the frames in a mix of landscape and portrait orientation while making the overall look balanced. I roughly spaced the frames 2 to 3 fingers apart, about 4 to 6 centimeters, to create one big focal point and to avoid disconnection.
Furthermore, I wish to know who was responsible for last night's outrage. I see the shadow of my profile. And there's no objection.
Once all the frames were mounted on the wall, I took the images that were not framed and started to see where they would look good. If I wanted a certain photograph in a particular frame that was not of the same size, I just reprinted the image larger or smaller depending on my needs. I found this approach much easier than framing everything first, then trying to arrange them in a way that would look good and complementary later. Because I was doing a floor-to-ceiling gallery, I had more frames than images. To avoid having empty frames, I took images from large magazines that are printed on quality paper and framed those. The idea is to have them as temporary fillers and placeholders with the intention of switching them out later as I create or acquire more personal images and art.
Did it ever occur to you that they might have used the drug to carry the body out?
When it comes to framing, I like to visit art galleries and art shows for inspiration. I observe how artists, photographers, and galleries present their work and try to do something similar without blatantly copying them. One example, as you can see here, is instead of framing an image with a traditional white window mat that comes with the frame, I opted to tape the photograph to a black poster board using painter's tape. I thought this looked cool, effortless, and punk rock, which is very much part of my aesthetic. Framing images in interesting and unconventional ways add a lot of originality and visual interest, in my opinion. And here you have it. This is my finished, dramatic floor-to-ceiling gallery wall in the foyer of my home. Although I use magazine clippings as temporary placeholders to fill empty frames, this was just a quick hack and temporary solution. I prefer to have original photographs and works of art displayed in my home versus generic mass-produced prints. It's more personal and unique in my opinion. That said, there are some famous photographs and prints that I love either for their composition, their subject matter, their meaning, or the stories behind them. This makes having them more justifiable. If I use prints, I do so sparingly, keeping a 60-40 ratio max between personal images and prints. For example, there are 25 frames on this wall. 15 images are original and 10 are prints. I also prefer professional framing. It's far more superior in quality and overall look. However, this can be quite costly to do all at once for something of this scale. So my plan is to have these images up for a while, see which ones I want to keep framed long term, and slowly invest in having them professionally framed over time.
And that's it. Now, I realized that this process was a more organic and intuitive way of working that might not suit everyone. I just wanted to share with you my process, particularly with those of you that might be having similar struggles to the ones that I had when building my gallery wall. I hope you found this video helpful, and until next time, stay tuned.
Furthermore, I wish to know who was responsible for last night's outrage.